The History of Boy Bands by Maria Graziosi. What is a boy band? A boy band is loosely defined as a vocal group consisting of young male singers, usually in their teenage years or in their 20s at the time of formation. Being vocal groups, most boy band members do not play musical instruments. However, exceptions do exist. Most boy bands dance as well as sing, usually giving highly choreographed performances. Boy bands are a big part of our world today. They are everywhere, in magazines, in newspapers, on the radio, on TV. I could really go on forever. Most boy bands become extremely successful with millions of fans, platinum CDs, and sold out concerts. How interesting is it that boy bands have been around since the 1900s? Get ready for a journey through time that shows the history and evolution of boy bands from the 1900s all the way to 2014. Enjoy. The 1900s. Could you believe that the concept of boy bands developed in the 1900s? Ever watch an old-time movie and see men hanging out at the barber shop with a group of four men singing around them? These men were known as barbershop quartets. This took place in the 20th century. They usually sang in four-part harmonies in an a cappella style, meaning without instruments. Each member had their own role. Usually, the lead sings the melody, the tenor harmonizes above the melody, the bass sings the lowest harmonizing notes, and the baritone completes the chord, usually below the lead. According to the Barbershop Harmony Society, barbershop music features songs with understandable lyrics and easily singable melodies. The 1920s. The period from the end of the First World War until the start of the Depression in 1929 is known as the Jazz Age. Developing on the barbershop phenomenon, male vocal groups like the Mills Brothers began to surface the United States. The Mills Brothers were actually brothers, and they would sing catchy tunes in front of their father's barbershop in the late 1920s. They were an American jazz and pop vocal quartet who made more than 2,000 recordings and sold more than 50 million copies. In 1934, the Mills Brothers became the first African Americans to perform for British royalty. They performed at the Regal Theatre in front of King George and Queen Mary. They acquired at least 36 gold records in their career. The Mills Brothers were inducted in the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1998. The popular music of the 30s can be used to better understand what the American people were going through in a time marked by depression, emerging technologies, and the growing population of cities, as many Americans relocated from rural areas. The music throughout the 1930s in many ways reflects how Americans imagined themselves during this period. Over the course of the 30s, American taste in music changed dramatically. Music ranged from jazz, swing, ethnic, and the blues. The Ink Spots, who became famous in the 1930s to the 1940s, helped create a connection between barbershop quartets and rhythm and blues. In the 1940s, more boy bands started to form and started singing happy and catchy tunes. Swing music was the most popular. The reason for these happy and catchy tunes was that Americans needed music to lift their spirits since they were in the middle of the Great Depression. Some popular boy bands of this time were the Four Tunes, Four Vagabonds, Orioles, and the Meltones, who all paved the way for doo-wop and rock and roll. Even though the barbershop quartet phenomenon started to fade in the 1920s, it was brought back in the late 1940s, early 1950s with doo-wop music. Doo-wop music was built upon vocal harmony and was one of the most mainstream pop-oriented R&B styles of all time. Doo-wop features vocal groups, harmony, a simple beat, sometimes little or no use of instruments, and simple lyrics. The Clovers, the Cleftones, the Ames Brothers, Drifters, Flamingos, Four Coins, The 1960s. The 1960s were when the most celebrated and iconic boy bands were formed. These bands included the Beatles, the Jackson 5, and the Temptations. You could definitely say that the Beatles paved the way for boy bands to come. The Beatles are known to be the most influential band ever, setting the trend for boy bands to come, such as the Rolling Stones. Their music was unique and had influences from soul, rhythm, and blues and rock. They created a global phenomenon and girls went crazy. They dominated Great Britain, the United States, and eventually the rest of the world. It was the first time that fans went wild to see performances and started developing crushes on band members that included the legendary John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. Here are some pictures of some of the most dedicated Beatle fans. The Jackson 5 was the first boy band consisting of brothers and were a major success in the 1960s. They started off performing at talent shows and other events every chance they got in hopes of becoming noticed. They finally got their big break when they signed with Motown Records in 1969. They made history in 1970 as the first recording act to have their first 4 singles reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, with songs that we all know and love, such as I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Saved, and I'll Be There. They sang in many different styles from R&B to disco. They had many #1 hits, and the late Michael Jackson later developed his own solo career and became the king of pop. The Jackson 5 were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997 and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1999. The 1970s. The music industry was booming in the 1970s. The 1970s was when the rise of disco started to emerge and became one of the biggest genres of the decade. For the first time, there is a boy band that appeals to the young Latina audiences. This boy band was called Menudo and was founded by Puerto Rican producer Eduardo Diaz in November 25, 1977. The group became very popular throughout Latin America, Brazil, Spain, and Europe. It wasn't until the 1980s when they became very popular in the United States. Like Michael Jackson, starting off from a boy band to a solo career, Ricky Martin was a member of Menudo. What's interesting about Menudo was that they were the first boy band to switch around band members, meaning when a member returned 16, they were replaced by someone new. Did you know a new Menudo returned in 2007? The recasting of the band was part of an MTV reality series called Making Menudo. I actually saw them live when they were an opening act for an Ali and AJ concert in 2008. Unfortunately, the band called it quits in 2009. The 1980s. The 1980s was the beginning of pop, dance music, and new wave. The 1980s was actually when the term boy band first emerged. I found this so interesting because it's 80 years after boy bands actually existed. My aunt's personal favorite band from the 80s was New Kids on the Block. They were one of the most popular boy bands of the 1980s. They were from Boston, Massachusetts, and were put together in 1985 by producer Maurice Starr. They played a key role in establishing boy bands as a dominant force in 1990s music. Their music had the bubble gum pop sound I learned about in this Pop Century course. Like the Beatles, girls went crazy for them. They were on the cover of countless magazines, had personalized dolls made after them, stickers, lunchboxes, and more, as you could see in the pictures. They sold 80 million records worldwide. They also won 2 American Music Awards in 1990 for Favorite Pop Rock Band and Favorite Pop Rock Album. The 1990s. It wasn't until the late 1990s where pop-oriented boy bands such as the Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees, NSYNC, and Hanson exploded commercially and dominated the market in the United States. The late 90s era marked the height of boy band popularity in North America. Lou Pearlman was the most successful boy band manager and founded bands including the best-selling boy band in history, the Backstreet Boys, along with NSYNC, LFO, and O-Town, who all became extremely successful. However, the Backstreet Boys preferred to be referred to as a vocal harmony group and not a boy band. They wanted to break the stereotype and sang a cappella at every chance they got. NSYNC was an American boy band that formed in Orlando, Florida in 1995. They had many hit songs in the 1990s. They took advantage of marketing opportunities and licensed their name out to create a great variety of merchandise, which included board games, microphones, lip balm, dolls, books, keychains, bedding, clothing, video games, and so on. There is even a wax figure of the group in Madame Hussein's New York Wax Museum that was created in 2009. Here is a picture of some NSYNC merchandise. On the left, you could see some NSYNC bedding. In the middle, you see Justin Timberlake with his puppet doll. And on the right, you see NSYNC lip balm. It was nice to see the whole band reunite and perform for the MTV VMAs this year. It was amazing to see the crowd go crazy. The early 2000s. In the early 2000s was when boy bands strayed away from that bubble gum pop sound and that boy you could take home to mom image. Bands such as Good Charlotte and Simple Plan started to emerge. Each original member of the band Good Charlotte attended La Plata High School. The band made a name for itself in Washington, D.C., where they played at an annual rock show and always participated in performances at small bars. Good Charlotte's album Good Charlotte was released in 2000 and was the start of their music career. During the course of their success, Good Charlotte landed appearances on American Idol, CNN, and The Today Show. They also graced the covers of the Rolling Stone and Alternative Press magazines, and were also featured in the New York Times. They also became popular on MTV, where their music videos were constantly played. They received a Viewer's Choice Award for their song Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous at the 2003 MTV Video Music Awards. Here is a picture of Good Charlotte on the cover of the Rolling Stones. The late 2000s. In the late 2000s, the real definition of boy bands came back with the Jonas Brothers. The Jonas Brothers quickly rose to fame from their show on the Disney Channel, allowing them to sell over 180,000 copies of their album in a week in 2008 and hit number 1 on the American Billboard 200. They even appeared in commercials for the candy Baby Bottle Pop, singing the jingle. In 2008, the group was nominated for the Best New Artist Award at the 51st Grammy Awards and won the award for Breakthrough Artist at the American Music Awards. On August 9, 2009, the Jonas Brothers hosted and performed on the Teen Choice Awards, hosted by Nickelodeon. Here is a picture of the Jonas Brothers series on the Disney Channel. Boy bands today. We are still living in a boy band phenomenon today. Currently, One Direction is dominating the boy band scene. They are an English-Irish pop band based in London, consisting of members Niall, Zayn, Liam, Harry, and Lewis. They finished third place on the X Factor British edition in 2010. Shortly after, they signed a record deal for Simon Cowell's label. They were able to gain international success by connecting with fans through social media outlets such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. One Direction had a 50 million business empire by June 2012, and they were proclaimed 2012's top new artist by Billboard. Their music has elements of teen pop, dance pop, pop rock, with electric pop and rock influences. They even released a makeup line last summer called Little Things Collection, with lipsticks named after each band member. At first, I thought this was unusual, but they are just doing what every other successful celebrity is doing by participating in endorsements and taking advantage of their fame to create additional profit. Here are some pictures from One Direction's makeup line. It consists of lipstick, lip gloss, nail art, makeup bag. The impact boy bands had and have on fashion. Whatever boy band is the latest craze, fans will go crazy to get that look. Even though the majority of boy band fans are girls, men look at them for fashion inspiration. They think that if they dress like they do, that they will get girls to like them as well. Consumers mimic all that they do, including haircuts, clothing, and attitude. It's interesting to see how boy bands have been singing songs about love to get us hooked since the 1900s. Boy bands will still continue to emerge since it's so easy for us to drift away from our own lives and live in the perfect world they describe in their music, with no heartbreak and endless love. As fans, we have been the biggest cause for the phenomenon of boy bands. We listen to their music, buy their albums, go to their concerts, and buy their merchandise. Boy bands wouldn't have lasted over 100 years without their fans.